I was trudging through the thick of Rondane forest when a sharp snap in the darkness stopped me dead in my tracks. It was one of those bitter cold nights up in the Norwegian mountains, the kind where the wind cuts right through you, and my flashlight was trembling in my grip as I pointed it toward a clearing just ahead. What I saw sent a shiver straight down to my bones, a tall, shadowy figure, pitch black and eerie, mirroring every single move I made, like some warped version of myself staring back from a twisted mirror. But here's the thing. There was nobody else out there, not a single living soul. My name's Elias, and I've been a park ranger in these parts for longer than I care to count. Rondane's always been my sanctuary, my home, a place where I could name every winding trail and gnarled tree by heart. But that night, it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like something alien, something that didn't want me there. I've spent years tending to this reserve, walking the paths, keeping an eye on the wildlife, helping hikers who'd strayed too far from safety. It was a steady rhythm, a way to keep my head above water, you know? Even after the worst thing that ever happened to me the day my little brother Lars disappeared right here in these woods. That loss carved a hole in me I've never managed to fill. He was with me 1 minute, splashing around by the creek, his laughter bouncing off the trees, and then the next, he was gone. No footprints, no sign of a struggle, just an empty quiet that's haunted me ever since. I've replayed that day 1,000 times, wondering what I missed, what I could have done different. Now, standing there with that shadow mocking me, it felt like the forest was finally ready to spit out some answers, or maybe just swallow me too. That night didn't feel special at first, just another shift in the endless stretch of my routine. I was out on the West Trail, the one that snakes through the oldest part of the forest, where the pines grow so dense they block out the moon. The wind was low, rustling the branches in a way that usually calmed me down. But there was something else in the air, a heaviness, a prickling at the back of my neck I couldn't shake off. I pulled my flashlight from my belt and started sweeping it across the dirt, looking for the usual. Deer tracks, maybe a wolf's paw print, if I was lucky. Then I saw them, footprints that made my gut twist up tight. At first, they looked human, like some hiker had wandered off the path, but as I followed them, they changed, stretched out, sharpened into these long, jagged claw marks that didn't belong to anything I'd ever seen. What kind of creature leaves a trail like that? I've come across plenty of weird stuff out here, bones in odd places, markings that didn't add up, but this was different, unnatural even. The past few months had been off, I'll admit that much. Gear showing up where it shouldn't. Faint noises at night that sounded too deliberate to be animals. One time, I found my own backpack slung over a branch 3 miles from where I'd set it down. Like someone, or something, had moved it just to mess with me. I'd started wondering if the isolation was getting to me, if I was imagining things to fill the quiet. But those tracks staring up at me from the dirt, they weren't in my head. And right then, I got this sinking feeling deep in my chest that whatever made them was watching me, waiting. The crack of breaking twigs hit me. Again, louder now, close enough to make my skin crawl. I whipped the flashlight around, beam cutting through the dark, but it didn't catch anything, just endless shadows stretching out between the trees. My heart was thudding so hard I could hear it over the wind, a frantic drumbeat in my ears. This forest, the place I'd always turned to for peace, felt like it had flipped a switch and gone hostile. The trees swayed lazily, their branches creaking in a way that sounded almost like whispering, like they were talking about me. Was it just the breeze, or was there something else out there nudging them along? I took a shaky step back, and that shadow in the clearing moved too, matching me perfectly. It wasn't just a trick of the light, it had a mind of its own, like it knew exactly what I'd do next. I'd heard the old-timers down in the village spin yarns about spirits lurking in these woods, restless things tied to the land. I'd always brushed it off as nonsense, the kind of stories you tell to scare kids or pass a long winter night. But standing there, With that thing mimicking me, I wasn't so quick to laugh anymore. Those dark shapes were tailing me, copying. Every twitch, every stumble, and the worst part? It felt like they were getting a kick out of it, like this was some sick game I didn't know the rules to. A cold sweat broke out on my neck, and before I could think twice, my legs took over. I ran. I bolted through the woods, no plan, just pure panic driving me. Branches snagged at my jacket, scratched my face, but I didn't care. The sting kept me grounded. My flashlight bounced in my hand, throwing jagged beams across the trail, lighting up roots and rocks in flashes. My lungs burned, breath coming in short, ragged gasps, but the fear wouldn't let me stop. Then my foot caught a twisted root, and I went down hard, face first, into the damp earth. The flashlight slipped free, rolling a few feet away, and when it stopped, its beam landed on something that made my blood run cold, a pair of worn-out boots just sitting there in the dirt. I scrambled up, heart in my throat, expecting to see someone standing over them, but there was nothing, just the boots alone, like their owner had vanished into thin air. I knew those boots, down to the scuffs on the toes. They were Lars. A wave of nausea hit me, mixed with this awful ache I hadn't felt in years. How the hell were they here? After he disappeared, I'd packed up all his stuff, buried it in a box out back to try and move on. I crawled over, grabbed the light, and swung it toward the trees, half expecting to see him standing there. But it was just that shadow again, closer now, so close I could almost feel it breathing. And then, soft as a breeze, I heard it. Elias. That voice cut through me like a knife, thin, warped but unmistakable. It was Lars, my little brother, calling out to me the way he used to when he'd wander off and get scared, but it couldn't be him. He'd been gone for years, lost to these woods. Or so I'd forced myself to believe. My hand shook so bad I nearly dropped the flashlight, my mind racing to make sense of it. I aimed the beam at where the sound came from, but all I got were the gnarled shapes of trees, their bark glistening wet in the light. The whisper came again, sharper this time. Elias, come to me. My heart slammed against my ribs. Was I losing it? Was this guilt finally breaking me down, conjuring his voice out of nothing? I wanted to tell myself it was all in my head, some cruel trick of memory, but then that shadow in the clearing shifted. It stretched up, thinned out, started, looking more like a person than a blur. I stumbled back, and the ground under me felt wrong, alive almost, like it was shifting too. Those tracks were changing again, human 1 second, clawed the next. The forest was playing with me, twisting reality into something I couldn't trust, and I was stuck right in the middle of it. I tried to pull myself together, sucking in a deep breath, but the air was thick, heavy, like it was pressing down on me. Lars's voice kept looping in my skull, mixing with the rustle of leaves until I couldn't tell them apart. Was it really him, or something wearing his voice like a mask? I shouted into the dark, "Stop it!" My voice hoarse and cracking, but the only reply was silence, thick and suffocating. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, dragging through the underbrush behind the trees. I swung the flashlight around, praying it was just a deer, something I could explain away. But it wasn't. It was Ingrid, my partner on the ranger crew, stepping out of the shadows. She looked like she'd seen a ghost, pale as death, clutching a busted radio in her hands. "Elias, you heard it too, didn't you?" she asked, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. I nodded, too rattled to speak. Ingrid's tougher than me most days, but right then, she looked small, fragile even. "There's something out here, Elias. It's not right," she said, her eyes flicking to the shadows creeping closer. "Me and Ingrid, we've been through a lot together. She lost her brother, too, years back in an avalanche that tore through the mountains, and that kind of pain tied us together in a quiet way. We didn't talk about it much, just swapped a look now and then that said, we got it. That night, she'd been patrolling the East Trail when the whisper started for her, too. It was his voice, Elias, my brother's. But it wasn't him. I know it wasn't, she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I spilled it all then about Lars, the shadow, those damn boots. We stood there, two broken people trying to figure out what the hell was happening. Was the forest digging into our heads, pulling out our worst memories to use against us? The shadows were inching nearer, sliding between the trees like smoke, with a purpose. Ingrid pointed down. More tracks, half human, half something else, clawing up the dirt. "They're hunting us," she whispered. And the words hit me like a punch. I couldn't argue. Every instinct I had was screaming the same thing. We had to move, get out of there before whatever it was closed in. We took off fast, damn near sprinting toward the ranger station a few miles out. Ingrid's radio was toast, and my phone couldn't grab a signal, cut off from the world, just us and the dark. The forest felt like it was shrinking around us, the trees leaning in, blocking our way. Lars's voice was back, bouncing from every direction. "Elias, you left me behind." It stung deep, guilt clawing at my insides like a trapped animal. Ingrid grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "Don't listen to it, Elias. It's not him. It's messing with you," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. But I wasn't so sure anymore. What if it was Lars, somehow still out here, begging for me to find him? The thought locked me up for a second. My feet stuck to the ground. Then I saw her, a figure up ahead on the trail, just standing there, watching us with hollow eyes. It was Sophia, another ranger who'd gone missing months back, someone we'd given up on ever seeing again. Sophia didn't look like herself anymore. Her face was gaunt, her clothes shredded, like she'd been through hell and back. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice low and rough, almost like it wasn't hers. Me and Ingrid shared a quick, uneasy glance, not sure how to handle this. "Sophia, what happened to you?" I asked, taking a step toward her, hoping she'd snap out of it. She flinched back, like I was the one to be scared of. "They took me, Elias. They take everyone," she muttered, her eyes darting around like a cornered animal. "Who's they?" Ingrid pressed, stepping up beside me, but Sophia just jabbed a finger at the shadows pooling around us. They were denser now, thicker, like they could reach out and grab you. "The forest doesn't forgive," she hissed, then turned and bolted into the trees. We shouted after her, tried to keep up, but she was gone in a heartbeat, swallowed by the dark. My pulse was hammering. None of this made sense. What had gotten into her? What was the forest doing to us? We couldn't just let Sophia vanish again, so we pushed deeper into the woods after her, even though we had no clue where she'd gone. The whispers were deafening now, Lars' voice tangling with Ingrid's brother's, a chorus of pain ripping through the night. It felt like the forest had cracked open our skulls and was rifling through every regret we'd ever buried. I could feel their stares, those shadows, waiting for me to trip up, to give in. My flashlight started flickering, and I smacked it against my palm, muttering curses under my breath to keep it alive. Ingrid froze beside me, pointing off to the left at a clearing bathed in faint moonlight. There, glinting in the dirt, was a necklace, a small silver chain I'd know anywhere. It was Lars. "This isn't happening," I said, my voice barely a whisper as I bent down to pick it up, my hands shaking like crazy. We'd found this exact necklace years ago near Black Lake, right after he went missing. I'd locked it in a drawer at home, swore I'd never touch it again. So how was it lying here, waiting for me? The necklace felt hot in my palm, like it was alive, pulsing faintly against my skin. Ingrid yanked me back hard. "Elias, drop that thing. It's not right," she said, her voice tight with panic. But I couldn't let go. It was like it was glued to me, pulling me in. Then a scream tore through the silence, raw and human, echoing from somewhere ahead. We didn't think, just ran toward it, stumbling over roots and rocks, the flashlight, barely keeping up. We burst into another clearing and found a handful of people, their faces ghost white, eyes wide with terror. Sophia was in the middle, screaming at us to get out. "They know who you are," she yelled, her voice breaking right before a towering shadow surged up and dragged her into the dark. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my brain refusing to process it. Ingrid grabbed my shoulders, shook me hard. "Elias, we've got to do something or we're dead," she said, her eyes blazing. "Do what, though?" The shadows were everywhere, closing in like a noose. That clearing turned into a living, nightmare fast. People were yelling, scrambling to get away, but the shadows snatched them up one by one, quick and silent. I saw Sophia thrashing as she got pulled into the void, her hands clawing at nothing. I lunged forward, instinct kicking in, but Ingrid hauled me back. "You can't save her, Elias. Stop," she shouted, her voice cracking under the strain. She was right, and it gutted me to admit it, watching Sophia disappear like that. Lars's voice roared back, louder than ever, dripping with venom. "You abandoned me." I clapped my hands over my ears, desperate to block it out. But it was inside me now. The shadows started laughing, a low, guttural sound that didn't come from anything human. Ingrid yanked her knife from her belt and slashed at the air like she could cut through them. It didn't even faze them. We were cornered, trapped by something we couldn't fight or understand. Then, out of the black, he stepped forward. Lars, or at least something wearing his shape, staring me down. It was him but twisted, eyes hollowed out, skin gray and lifeless, and a smile that didn't belong on my brother's face. "You left me here, Elias," he said, each word slicing into me like broken glass. I staggered back, the necklace still clutched tight in my fist. "You're not Lars," I choked out, trying to convince myself more than anything. But the guilt was there, a weight crushing my chest, making it hard to breathe. Ingrid's voice broke through, sharp and urgent. "Elias, it's a lie. Don't listen to it." She grabbed my arm, pulling me back from the edge. The thing that looked like Lars laughed, a sound so cold it froze me to my core. The shadow swelled, growing solid, feeding off every ounce of pain I was leaking. I hurled the necklace to the ground and screamed, "Enough!" my voice raw and ragged. For a heartbeat they stopped, like I'd caught them off guard. Ingrid didn't waste it. She dragged me out of there, away from that thing's empty stare. But deep down, I knew we weren't done, not by a long shot. We ran until our legs gave out, collapsing by a creek, the same one where Lars and I used to mess around as kids, skipping stones and chasing each other through the shallows. The silence settled in again, but it wasn't a relief. It was oppressive, like the forest was holding its breath, waiting. Ingrid dropped to her knees, panting hard, her hands digging into the dirt. "What the hell's going on, Elias?" she asked, her voice shaky, almost pleading. I didn't have an answer, just stared at the water, memories flooding back of that last day with him. Was he still out here, alive somehow, caught in some trap I couldn't see? Or had the forest warped him into one of those things, a puppet for whatever was stalking us? The shadows hadn't followed, but I could feel them lingering, patient and hungry. Then I saw her, a woman standing across the creek, shrouded in darkness, her eyes locked on me. She smiled, slow and deliberate, like she was promising more. Nightmares to come. We'd made it this far, but how long could we keep this up? I had to figure this out, had to face it. There was no running forever. She didn't move, just stood there on the far bank, that eerie smile stretching across her face like she owned the night. A chill hit me hard, deeper than the cold air. This wasn't just some random figure. She knew me, knew everything I was carrying. Ingrid hauled herself up, gripping her knife so tight her knuckles went white. "Who the hell are you?" she shouted, her voice echoing across the water, but the woman didn't flinch, just turned and melted back into the trees, gone like she'd never been there. We were left standing there, dazed, trying to catch our breath and our bearings. The necklace was in my pocket now. I didn't even recall picking it up, but there it was, heavy against my leg. Every thought of Lars twisted my guts tighter. Was he calling me for real, or was this all some cruel setup? The forest hummed around us, alive in a way that made my skin crawl, like it was watching every move we made. I glanced at Ingrid, and she gave me a nod. silent, fierce, like she was saying we'd see this through together. But see what through? The truth was buried out there somewhere, tangled up in the dark, and I had to dig it up, no matter what it cost. If you like this story, smash that like button and subscribe for more creepy tales like this one. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's next. Share it with your friends and drop a comment below letting me know what you thought or what you'd want to see in the future. I'll never forget that night. It hit me like a punch in the gut. Standing at the edge of Tungus National Forest, the cold bit into my skin and the air felt alive somehow, like it was watching me. The trees loomed tall, swaying just enough to make the moonlight dance across the ground in creepy, jagged shapes. I was on patrol, same as always. A park ranger gig I picked up after my dreams of flying planes went up in smoke, crashed, and burned, literally. But that night, it wasn't routine, not even close. The Alaskan wilderness stretched out in front of me, endless and dark. I'd always liked the quiet, used to find peace in it, but this time it felt heavy, like something was pressing down on my chest. I couldn't shake it. My boots crunched against the frozen ground as I moved, flashlight cutting through the shadows. That's when I saw them. Lights, not stars, not planes, something else. They pulsed up there in the sky, green and blue streaks, slashing through the black like silent lightning. I stood there, mouth half open, watching them twist and flicker. It wasn't natural, no way. I've seen the northern lights plenty of times, but this was different. Felt alive almost, like they were staring right back at me. I grabbed my radio, fumbling with the buttons. Needed to call it in, let the station know something weird was going on, but all I got was static. Loud, angry static that drowned out everything. I smacked the thing against my hand, thinking maybe it was busted. Nothing, just that hiss screaming in my ears like the universe didn't want me talking. Then I heard it. A scream, muffled far off, carried on the wind like a whisper. You're not sure you really caught. My heart kicked into overdrive, pounding so hard I thought it had bust out of my chest. I didn't think, just ran. Bolted down the main trail, flashlight bouncing, adrenaline pumping through me like fire. The forest swallowed me up as I went. Trees pressed in close, branches snagging at my jacket. I didn't care. That scream, it was human, I was sure of. Someone was out there, hurt or worse. I kept going, lungs burning, until I hit a clearing. And there it was, just sitting on the ground, a backpack. I stopped dead, breath fogging in the cold. The pack was still warm when I touched it, like someone had dropped it minutes ago. The fabric was scorched, edges singed black. Weirdest part, the ground around it was clean. No footprints, no scuffs, nothing. Just the pack, alone, like its owner had vanished into thin air. I crouched there, staring at it, my mind racing. Another hiker gone. It wasn't the first time. I'd seen this before too many times lately. People disappearing, leaving behind little scraps of their lives. I'd written them off as accidents, lost hikers who didn't know the terrain. But this felt wrong. My hand shook as I unzipped the bag. Inside, just the usual stuff: water, bottle, a map, some granola bars. Nothing to tell me who it belonged to or what happened. I stood up, scanning the trees. The quiet was back, thick and suffocating. But I swear something was watching me. I used to love this forest, the streams, the evergreens, the way it all felt untouched. It was my escape after the crash, the one that ended my pilot days and left me grounded. But now, it didn't feel like a sanctuary anymore. It felt alive in a way that made my skin crawl. Those lights flashed through my head. Again, I glanced up, half expecting to see them still dancing up there. Nothing now, just stars. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe I was losing it. I'd been out here too long, chasing ghosts in the dark. But that scream, it was real. I couldn't shake. I slung the backpack over my shoulder, figuring I'd take it back to the station. Evidence, right? Something to log. But as I turned to head back, The air shifted, got colder, sharper. My gut twisted, telling me to move, to get out. I didn't. Listen fast enough. A rustle broke the silence, soft at first, then louder. I spun around, flashlight shaking in my hand. Shadows moved between the trees, and there she was. A woman stepped out, pale as the moonlight, eyes wide and wild. "Hey!" I yelled, voice cracking with a mix of relief and suspicion. She froze, staring at me like I was the one who didn't belong. "What are you doing out here?" I asked, stepping closer. Her hands were trembling, and her voice came out shaky. "I could ask you the same. I heard it too, the scream and those lights. They're not just in my head, are they?" I shook my head, feeling my pulse kick up again. "No, they're real. You're not alone in this." She took a shaky breath and stuck out her hand. "I'm Mia." I grabbed it, quick and firm. For a second, we just stood there, two strangers, stuck in the same nightmare. "I'm looking for my brother," she said, her voice barely holding together. "He went hiking a few days ago. Hasn't come back." My stomach dropped. Another one. "That's the third this month," I muttered, glancing at the backpack still slung over my shoulder. "We need to find him." Her eyes lit up, fierce and determined. "You know this. Forrest, you can help me." I wanted to say yes, but the weight of my past crashed down hard. The crash, the fire, the screams I couldn't unhear. "I'm not sure I can," I admitted. "It's getting worse out here. I don't want to drag you into danger." "Danger's already here," she shot back, cutting through my doubt like a knife. "You can't just stand there and let fear run the show." She was right. I hated it, but she was. I couldn't keep hiding from this, whatever it was. "Okay," I said, voice steadying. "We'll look for him, but we gotta be careful." We started moving deeper into the woods. The air got colder, the shadows thicker. Trails I knew like the back of my hand twisted into something unfamiliar. I glanced at Mia, who was scanning the trees like she'd spot her brother any second. "What did he say before he left?" I asked. "Just that he wanted a quiet spot," she said, frowning. "He loved the wild. Too much, maybe. Last I heard, he was near the ridge." I nodded. I knew that area. Steep cliffs, thick cover. A place people got lost in too easy. "We need to hurry," I said, picking up the pace. Then it hit, a low vibrating through the ground up into my bones. I stopped, looking at Mia. She heard it too, her face going pale. "What's that?" she whispered. "I don't know," I said, a chill snaking up my spine. "But we can't stop now." The lights came back, brighter, wilder, weaving through the trees like they were alive. I couldn't explain it, didn't want to. My head screamed at me to rationalize it, but my gut, it was screaming something else. We were being hunted. Mia grabbed my arm, pointing ahead. "Look, over there." A clearing glowed under the lights, faint smoke curling up. "A campfire," she said, hopeful. We moved closer, but the warmth I expected wasn't there. Just cold, creeping dread. It was a campsite, abandoned, gear scattered, a tent flapping in the wind. No fire, no people. "Something's off," I muttered, instincts howling at me to run. Then a figure stumbled out of the tent, gaunt and wild-eyed. "Help!" he screamed, lurching toward us. "Get out! They're coming!" My heart slammed against my ribs as he grabbed my jacket. Eyes locked on mine. "They take people into the lights." Before I could say a word, the ground shook, the lights flared, and everything went to hell. Shadows twisted, his screams cut off, and he dropped like a rag doll. I yanked Mia back, shouting, "Run!" We bolted, crashing through the brush, the forest turning into a maze of chaos. The lights chased us, pulsing, mocking. I wasn't just a ranger anymore. I was prey, and whatever was out there wasn't letting go. We stumbled into a thicket, branches clawing at us as I tried to catch my breath. The hum wouldn't quit, buzzing through the air like a warning I couldn't ignore. Mia's voice cut through, sharp and shaky. "What was that back there? That guy? He was out of his mind." "Maybe," I panted, wiping sweat off my face. "But I've seen stuff out here that'd break anyone." My mind flashed to my partner, lost on a search years back. His voice begging me to find him. I'd failed him. The guilt still clung to me like damp rot. I shook it off, focusing on Mia. "We gotta keep moving. Your brother's out there." She nodded, but I could tell she felt it too, the wrongness of this place. The trees whispered, branches curling like fingers reaching out. Then I saw it. A spiral carved into bark, lines spiking out like a crude star. I staggered back, breath catching. I'd seen that symbol before, near where the last hiker vanished. "Mia," I said, voice trembling, "this isn't just about your brother. This is bigger. That mark, it's tied to all of them." She frowned, stepping closer. "What do you mean?" "There's a story," I said, swallowing hard. "Old ranger talk. They say the lights. There's something ancient, something that pulls people in, promises answers, then takes them." Her eyes went wide. "Takes them?" she whispered, like saying it louder would make it real. I nodded, my past crashing into me again. I thought it was just a ghost story, but now I trailed off, the pieces clicking together too fast. That guy at the camp, he'd known. He'd tried to warn us. But why us? Why now? The ground rumbled, lights flaring overhead like a storm, about to break. I felt it, a pull tugging at my head, my chest. Was I imagining this? Going crazy like the old-timers said rangers did out here? "Mia!" I yelled, panic clawing up my throat. "We gotta go!" But as I turned, I froze. A shadow stepped out, my partner, dead, gone. But there he was, eyes hollow and sad. "Help me," he whispered, voice cutting through me like a blade. Mia grabbed my arm. "Who's that?" she hissed, fear cracking her voice. "I don't know," I stammered, staring at him. It couldn't be real, couldn't be. But he looked so alive, so broken. My past and this nightmare were smashing together, and I couldn't breathe. The lights pulsed, urging me closer, promising something I couldn't name. "Mia, we're leaving," I shouted, yanking her away. But the path twisted, fading under our feet. The forest was playing with us, mocking us. My partner's voice echoed, soft and desperate, pulling at me even as we ran. We crashed through the brush, the air thickening, the whispers growing louder. I could feel him behind me, my guilt, my failure given shape. But I wouldn't stop. Couldn't. Mia's hand in mine was the only thing keeping me grounded. The lights flared again, wild and angry, like they knew we were slipping away. I didn't look back, couldn't afford to. Whatever this was, it wasn't over, but I'd fight it. For Mia, for her brother, for me. The shadows deepened as we ran, the forest closing in like it wanted to swallow us whole. My lungs burned, but I kept going, dragging Mia along. The air turned icy, crackling with something I couldn't name. Every step felt like a scream to turn back, but I wouldn't listen. A light blasted behind us, blinding, and I stumbled, throwing a hand up. "Keep going," I yelled, pulling Mia through the glare. That ranger's laugh, wailed, unhinged, chased us through the trees. The ground shook again, and I heard cries, faint and far off, like trapped echoes. I wouldn't let it get me. My heart pounded, a drum beat against the chaos. "Stay with me," I shouted, pushing harder. The shadows clawed at my legs, my partner's, voice tugging at me, soft, pleading. I gritted my teeth, shoving it down. Then the ground dropped, and we tumbled into a clearing. Mist swirled thick, alive, curling around us. And there he was again, my partner, glowing in the haze. "Help me," he said, voice breaking this time, heavy with pain. I froze chest tight. "Mia, we've got to face this," I said, voice shaking. Tears stung my eyes, but I choked them back. "It's feeding off us. Our fear, our guilt. We can't let it." She nodded, stepping up beside me, her face set like stone despite the terror. "You're not real." I roared at him, rage and grief exploding out. "You're just my past. I won't let you take her too." The air screamed, a deafening howl, and the shadows surged, wrapping around us like a noose. I held Mia's hand, bracing for the end. Then, silence. The dark pulled back, my partner's shape flickering out like a dying flame. I stood there, panting, heart hammering. The forest went still. but it wasn't peace. It was waiting, whispering through the leaves, like it was sizing us up. Did we do it? Mia asked, voice wobbly. Is he gone? I nodded, uncertain. Maybe, but this place, it's still alive. I could feel it, restless, coiled. The victory didn't sit right. It was too empty, too fragile. We started back, the woods shifting under us. Less hostile maybe, but still heavy with something dark. I glanced over my shoulder, an old tree, bark carved with symbols, pulsing faintly. Mia, check that out, I said, pointing, curiosity tugging at me. She looked, her fear melting into Tao, something sharper. What's it mean? She asked. I didn't know, but the air buzzed, alive with questions. Then a breeze hit, cold and sharp, and a voice drifted through. His voice. Help me! I stopped cold, blood icing over. The forest wasn't done. It was holding its breath, waiting for us to slip. We stepped away, but I knew this wasn't the end. Something bigger was still out there. The trees loomed as we moved, their whispers curling around us like smoke. I couldn't shake it. That feeling we'd stepped into a dream gone wrong. The voice lingered, a thread tying me to the dark, and then the lights flared again, one last time, bright and cruel, daring us to come back. We kept moving, but the forest didn't feel real anymore. It was a maze of shadows and half-truths, twisting around us. My head spun like I was caught in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. That voice, his voice, stuck with me, haunting every step. A shimmer hit the clearing, sudden and sharp. The tree's symbols glowed, weaving light that swallowed us whole. I felt it, a tug, pulling at my mind, unraveling everything. Mia, I whispered, heart racing. We're not just lost. We're trapped, stuck in something warped. Her eyes went huge, terror sinking in. What do you mean? She asked, voice breaking. I couldn't answer fast. The ground quaked, and flashes hit me. Lives I'd lived, ones I hadn't, flickering, like a broken film. Friends, moments, regrets, all wrong. Mia, we've got to decide, I said, trembling. Break out and face whatever's next, or stay here, lost in this hell. But if we leave, we might lose everything. The forest pressed in, whispers screaming at us to pick. I looked at her, and she looked back. I'm with you, she said, steady despite the chaos. That hit me hard. We were in this together, no matter what. I grabbed her hand, taking a deep breath, ready to jump into whatever came next. The world needed us to choose. We stepped forward, and everything exploded. Colors, light, a rush that tore through me. I felt it, a pull to something new, something unknown. Salvation? Doom? I couldn't tell. The forest roared, fighting to hold us. Then, nothing. Silence. The woods were gone. We stood there, hands locked in emptiness. My chest heaved, mind scrambling to catch up. Where were we? What had we done? The air hung still, heavy with what we'd left behind. I glanced at Mia. She was shaken but alive. We'd made it out, maybe, but the weight of it all stayed, a shadow we couldn't shake. The forest's grip wasn't fully gone. I took a step, testing the ground. Solid, but unfamiliar. The lights, the screams, the symbols, they echoed in my head, pieces of a puzzle I couldn't solve. Mia squeezed my hand, anchoring me. We weren't done yet. A faint hum started, low and distant. My stomach twisted. Was it following us? Had we really escaped, or just stepped deeper into the trap? I didn't know, but I felt it. Something watching, waiting. The emptiness stretched out, endless and quiet, too quiet. I looked around, searching for a sign, anything. Nothing came, just us, alone, with the ghosts of what we'd faced still clinging close. Mia broke the silence. What now? She asked, voice small but firm. I didn't have an answer, just a feeling we'd traded one mystery for another. The air shivered, and I knew this wasn't over. If you liked this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more creepy tales. Share it with your friends. Let them get lost in the mystery too. Drop a comment below. What was your favorite part? Want more endings like this? Let me know. I was deep in the Black Forest one night when a weird rustle stopped me cold. It was dark, the kind of dark that swallows you whole, and my lantern flickered as I swung it toward the trees. That's when I heard it, a faint giggle, like kids, playing but twisted, wrong somehow. My name's Ivo Mueller, and I've been a ranger out here for over 10 years. These woods have always been my life, a mix of quiet beauty and hidden risks I've learned to handle. Growing up, I heard all the old stories about spirits haunting this place, but I brushed them off as fairy tales for kids. Lately, though, sleep's been dodging me, those creepy laughs creeping into my dreams, reminding me of things I'd rather forget. The forest I used to know like the back of my hand, it's turning into something else. I keep hearing those giggles on my patrols, now woven into the wind like they belong here. Every time I yell out, asking who's there, they shift into whispers, my name over and over, like they've got some hold on me. It's chilling, like cold fingers brushing my neck. I can't shake the feeling that these woods are watching me, waiting for something. That night felt off from the start. I was checking the north trail, the one that cuts through the thickest part of the forest, where the trees loom like they're guarding secrets. The air was heavy, damp with that earthy smell I usually love, but it felt wrong, too still. I tightened, my grip on the lantern, letting its shaky light bounce off the pines. Then I heard it again, those giggles, soft at first, like they were sneaking up on me. I've been out here long enough to know every sound. Owls, foxes, the wind, but this wasn't any of that. It was too human, too deliberate. I called out, "Who's there?" My voice echoed and died fast, swallowed by the dark. The laughter got louder, bouncing around like it was coming from everywhere at once. My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to run, but I've never been one to back down. I've seen weird stuff before, tools misplaced, trails that loop nowhere, but this was different. It felt personal, like the forest was picking me out of the crowd. I kept moving, boots crunching on the dirt, trying to shake the unease. The whispers started up again, low and hissy, saying, "Ivo," like they knew me better than I know myself. My lantern barely cut through the shadows, and every tree looked like it was leaning in, listening. I grew up on tales my mom used to tell, lost kids wandering these woods, their spirits stuck forever, looking for someone to drag along. I'd laugh it off back then, call it bedtime nonsense. Now those stories were clawing at me, making me question everything. The giggles turned sharp, almost mocking, and I spun around, yelling into the dark again. Nothing answered, just that creepy quiet that makes your skin crawl. I've spent years alone out here, but I've never felt this. Kind of alone, like something was right behind me, breathing down my neck. My hands were sweaty, slipping on the lantern handle. Whatever this was, it wasn't letting up. By the time dawn hit, I was beat, dragging myself back to my cabin. The forest was still humming with that weird energy, but the light made it feel less suffocating. I pushed the door open, expecting the usual comfort, wood stove, creaky chair, my mess of maps. Instead, I froze. My stuff, axe, lantern, radio, was laid out on the floor in a perfect circle, like some kind of ritual setup. I hadn't left it like that. No way. My heart started pounding, and I checked the windows, locked tight. No footprints outside, no sign anyone had been in. What the hell was this? I've lived out here too long to spook easy, but this was messing with my head. I grabbed the axe, just to feel something solid, and stood there, staring at that circle. The forest wasn't just out there anymore. It was creeping inside, playing games I didn't sign up for. The Black Forest isn't just trees and dirt. It's alive, I swear it. You feel it in the way the branches twist, the way the paths shift when you're not looking. I've walked these trails a million times, but lately they're different. Turning back on themselves, leading me in circles, it's like the woods are screwing with me, testing how much I can take. Those old stories about lost kids kept popping up in my head, uninvited. Mom used to say they'd call out to anyone who got too close, looking for peace or payback. I'd roll my eyes back then, but now I was starting to wonder. The whispers were louder that morning, tugging me back out there, pulling me towards something deep in the trees. I didn't want to go, but my feet moved anyway, like they weren't mine anymore. There's this spot, an old grave, hidden under moss and roots, that I've always avoided. Now, it felt like that's where they wanted me. I grabbed my gear and headed out, the whispers buzzing in my ears like flies. The forest was thick with mist, clinging to everything, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Every step felt heavier, like the ground was trying to hold me back. I've dealt with bears, storms, lost hikers, you name it. But this was something else. Tools had been vanishing for weeks, showing up in weird places, like someone was moving them just to mess with me. One time, I found my knife stuck in a tree, blade first, 10 feet off the ground. No explanation, just there. Now with those giggles and whispers dogging me, I couldn't pretend it was nothing. The grave was calling, and I knew the legends. Those kids, stuck in some endless loop, mad as hell at the world that forgot them. Was that what this was? Revenge? Night fell fast, and the forest changed. Shadows stretched out like they were reaching for me. The air got cold, real cold, the kind that seeps into your bones and stays there. I was out checking another trail when the rustling started, soft, sneaky, like something brushing through the bushes. Then the laughter hit again, clear as day, sending a jolt of ice through me. I gripped my lantern tighter, the light jumping around, throwing shadows that looked alive. "Who's there?" I shouted, but my voice cracked weak against the dark. The giggles swelled, taunting me, like they knew I couldn't do a damn thing. I was about to turn back when she showed up, Lena, my partner ranger, stepping out of the trees. Her hair was a wild mess, eyes sharp despite the night. "Evo, you shouldn't be out here alone," she said, sounding steady even with the chill. "Lena's been with me a few months now, tough as nails and twice as stubborn. She'd heard it too, the laughter, and it had been nagging at her. Same as me." "I thought I was going crazy," I admitted, glad to have her there, but still rattled. "It's been weeks of this," she nodded, stepping closer, her face half lit by my lantern. "I've heard it too, Evo. Thought it was just the wind at first, but it's not. Maybe those old stories aren't just stories." That hit me hard. I'd spent my life shrugging off that stuff, but here we were, stuck in it. "What do they want?" I asked, barely whispering. She looked off into the shadows, thinking, maybe it's not about what they want. Maybe it's what we owe them, those kids lost out here, needing something from us. Her words sank in, heavy and cold, like the truth I'd been dodging. The wind kicked up, howling through the trees, whispering stuff I couldn't quite catch. I kept thinking about what Lena said, owing them something. It made my stomach twist. Could I really be tied up in this, some kind of link to their pain? The laughter stopped dead, and the silence was worse, thick, like a blanket smothering us. "Evo," Lena said, her voice low. "We should get out of here. This isn't safe." But I couldn't move. "No, we've got to figure this out," I said, stepping forward, feeling the ground shake a little under me. Lena's face tightened, but she stuck with me, her jaw set. We pushed deeper into the woods, the air getting darker, heavier, like it was pushing back. I could feel the forest, watching, sizing us up. Every shadow felt like a threat, every snap a warning. We kept going, the trees closing in tighter, the path fading into nothing. Then I saw it, a kid, small and pale, darting between the trunks. "Help us!" they cried, voice cutting through me like a blade. I froze, my lantern shaking, barely lighting their face, sad, lost. Lena grabbed my arm, nails digging in. "They're calling us, Evo. We can't just walk away." The kid vanished, swallowed by the dark, but that cry stuck with me, rattling around in my head. I wasn't just a ranger anymore. This was bigger, pulling me in whether I liked it or not. We moved toward where the kid had been, the forest shifting around us, alive and angry. My mind was racing, jumping between fear and a weird kind of duty. What did they need? What was I supposed to do? The deeper we went, the worse it got. Shadows twisting into shapes that didn't make sense. Whispers turning into cries. I started thinking about my brother, Marcus. He went missing in these woods when we were kids. I was supposed to watch him, but I turned away for one damn minute, and he was gone. That guilt's been eating me alive ever since, festering under the surface. Lena, I said, my voice shaky, what if it's not just them? What if it's me, my guilt coming back? She stopped, staring at me like she was seeing something new. You never told me about Marcus, she said, soft but serious. Maybe it's all tied together. That hit me like a truck, years of running from it, and now it was right in front of me, laughing in my face. Then they came. More kids, ghostly figures popping out of the shadows, their faces all pained and pleading. Help us! You know where we are, one yelled, and it shook me to my core. I felt it, a pull, like they were part of me somehow. Lena stepped back, her breath catching. Ivo, look, behind you. I turned and there they were, a crowd of them, eyes glowing with something dark, something hurt. My heart was racing. This wasn't just some spooky story anymore, it was real, and it was pissed. What do they want? I gasped, trying to keep it together. Lena's voice dropped. Maybe it's not just help. Maybe they're mad. Maybe they want us to pay. The shadows thickened, swirling like a storm, and I felt my grip on reality slipping fast. The laughter came back, loud and wild, mixing with their cries until I couldn't tell what was what. The kids surged closer, their hands reaching out, cold as death brushing my skin. I was drowning in it, their pain, my guilt, all crashing together. We've got to help them, I shouted at Lena, desperate. They're stuck here like Marcus. I can't let that go on. She looked torn, scared. What if they're not just lost, Ivo? What if they're out for blood? The ground rumbled, and I saw it. A faint light ahead, glowing through the trees, calling me. I started toward it, feeling their touch like ice. I've got to try, I said, my voice hard. Lena grabbed me. What if you're wrong? What if this pulls us under? I looked at her, my anchor, and made up my mind. I had to face this, no matter what. We pushed toward that light, the kids trailing us, their whispers turning into a song that hit me deep. The shadows fought back, wrapping around us, cold and tight. I grabbed Lena's hand, holding on like it was the only thing keeping me sane. We're doing this together, I said, and she nodded, fierce. The light grew, pushing the dark away, and the kids started fading, shimmering out like smoke. Thank you, one whispered soft and sad, but some of us can't go. That stuck with me, Marcus, still out there maybe. The shadow screamed as I held them back, letting Lena run toward the light. Find him, I yelled, my voice breaking. I felt peace. Even as the dark pulled me in, I'd fought for something bigger. If you like this, hit like and subscribe. For more creepy stories, share with your buddies and comment what you thought or what you want next.